Hi everybody, I am finally finished with this video. I hope you guys like it. I like the way the shirt turned out aside from the couple mistakes that I made. If you guys have any comments or suggestions on how to fix the areas that I got wrong, feel free to leave a comment in the comment box below. And I'm really trying to grow my channel, so if you guys could give it a thumbs up, comment in the comment box and share it, that really helps me a lot. And I want to say thank you for whoever is clicking the links in my description box. It is helping me without costing you a dime. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for hanging in there, and let's get started on this video. Okay, now that I have all of my pattern pieces marked and notched, I am going to start the sewing. And what I'm going to do is remove the papers from everything first, and then on a straight stitch at the longest stitch, which is a basting stitch, I'm going to base stitch from here, here to here, and then come down like this, and then on the neckline I'm going to do the same thing. So that is just so that while you're handling the fabric, that neckline doesn't get stretched out. And then I'm going to prep this, the pocket, for attaching it onto the fabric. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to fold this under 1/4 of an inch and then fold it back like this. Actually, it goes, yeah, that way. And then sew around it and then flip it right back out. And so I'll prep that and then I'll be back. Okay, I stay stitched the neckline right here on these, and you can see where I have the marks where I'm going to put the pockets. I stay stitched the neckline here, and I prep the pockets. So now all I have to do is sew those on the shirt, and that part will be done, and then I'll start assembling everything. I got the pockets pinned in place. Our next step is to get the lower part of the back. This is the part that comes down below the yoke, and we mark these lines. So we need to take this line and match it up with that one. And I'm going to pin that in place. And then this line, and take it over to that one. This is what's going to create that little extra, allow the back to have a little extra room for movement without it being too baggy across, this area here. So I'm going to go and press that down before I take a basting stitch at 1/2 inch from the raw edge and sew right across here. I'm going to press it down so that when I take these pins out and they're sewn up here, that it doesn't want to spread out still. I want to keep it in place, and because it's linen, it'll hold that crease really well. Okay, I'm back. I put the pleat in wrong, so I had to take it out and redo it. So now that that is finished, you need to put your yoke, and it goes like this, right sides together, and I know that this is the right side or the wrong side because of dots. So I marked all the wrong sides. That's how I knew that was the wrong side when I did this whole thing. So now I'm going to pin this in place, and then I'm going to sew it on using a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Okay, I got the yoke sewed on, and I don't know if you can see this, but the shiny, I was ironing instead of pressing, and so I'm hoping that when I wash it before I send it, it'll take care of that. Anyway, so I cut 2 of these. The pattern called for 1, but I ended up cutting 2 because I wasn't paying attention. And then I thought, well, because I was thinking about the double yoke where the cases are inseamed, or no, the seams are encased. Jeez. But it doesn't call for that. And I could have done it, but this is, even though it's linen, it feels kind of heavy. So I didn't want to necessarily do a double layer up there, especially, you know, guys get really hot really easy. And so I figured just keep it all 1 layer, which is why I'm doing linen, because it's cooler. So I think instead I am going to flip this over here, and I'm going to trim off the top layer of the seam allowance, and I'm going to do like the flat felled seam. So hopefully I don't mess this up. So basically we're doing just like we did on my last video before part 1, when I did the shirt sleeve. I'm going to basically do the same thing. So this needs to be at least cut in half, so that your other seam will fold over nicely. And I really like these scissors because that little part right here keeps that other layer of the seam allowance away. Minimizes the chance that I would cut that too. So now I'm going to fold it over. So I'm going to fold it up to that seam and then fold it up and pin it in place. Okay, this area right here where the pleats are is kind of thick, so you can see the pins aren't holding in very well. When I get to that point, I'll just have to do it with my fingers to make sure it gets all tucked under there. Okay, everybody, from here on out, I will not have overhead shots because my phone holder that I used to attach to my window to do the overhead shot has broken. And until I can get another one or fix that one, I will have to either hold it in my hand like I'm doing now or do some odd like side shots. Anyway, so here's my flat felled seam. That turned out pretty good. Now I'm going to attach the shoulders, and then after that, then I will interface my collar and my facings. Okay, I've got my the fronts of my shirt on, and you can see my beautifully pressed shoulder seams. You guys, do not pass up on this step. Please do it correctly. And I know it seems like a lot to do, but every single time you sew a seam, you need to take it to the iron and press it out really good, because this really makes a difference in how professional and how clean and just really nice your shirt will look. Now that I have the fronts attached, I am going to flat felt the shoulder seams because I kind of want to have that uniform look. I have it here, and then I'm going to have it here. So I'm going to trim the seam allowance on the back, the shirt back right here, and then I'm going to fold this over it. So the same way I did it last time, I'm going to cut the seam allowance on the back side, you know, from the shirt back, in half widthwise, roughly. Now I need to interface both front facings and one portion of the collar, because the collar is in two pieces and I have to interface one. So I'm going to pin these down, cut them out, and interface them, and I'll be back. I went ahead and fused the interfacing to the front facings and one layer of the collar. So far I'm sticking pretty closely to what the instructions are calling for. Sorry about the lighting. It's only like 8:30 in the morning, so the sun is still coming in my window. I usually wait a couple hours before I start recording, but I have to go to work possibly. So all I need to do is fold this area down here, and then that will be finished. The facings will be finished, and then here I need to sew a seam or a line of stitching 5/8 of an inch from here, and it's going to go all the way around to this side. And then we are going to, I don't know if you can see it, the little marks that we made right here. We have to clip in those, and this stitching line is really important because there's a point in here you're going to have to hand stitch, and when you have that stitching line, then you know that's going to match up to where this portion of the collar is sewn to the shirt. So you could do without it, but I always use a line like this so that I can fold it directly on that line, and that line of stitching can be my guide as to where I need to sew it onto the shirt. So you guys, I'm sorry I'm not showing a lot of the actual sewing part. I'm trying to keep this video short, and it's already longer than part one. So yeah, I'm just trying to keep it down, and you guys already know how to sew, you know, up to this point. So I try to show you what I sew, not necessarily show you the actual sewing. Okay, I sewed this, you saw this in the picture, folded this down, and then I sewed the two pieces together here, here, and here. Now I'm going to trim off the corners and then grade the seam allowance, and then flip it right side out. Okay, I sewed the facing in, and I aligned it along this edge here, right sides facing, and sewed a seam at a 5/8 inch seam allowance, And then I did the pressing, which you press it this way, open it up, press it this way, flip it over, and with the seam allowances open, you press it this way. Then I went back and pressed the seams towards the facing, and then we're going to edge stitch, and that means sewing just this side of that seam, and that will keep all this, the seam allowance, pressed flat, so that when you are wearing your shirt, this side won't roll out. So it'll look like this with a seam right here. Actually, I got to press it right on like that, and then there'll be a seam right here. So from this side, it's just a nice finished look that won't roll out. Okay, I have the facings on. I understitched it, pressed the seams towards the facing, understitched it, and then trimmed this off so there's not so much bulk under there. And then when it's finished, it's going to fold like this, and you won't see any stitching. So now that that's finished, the facings are on and understitched, you're going to take your collar, and the part that's got interfacing is going to be the part that is folded down and facing you, because when you put the collar on, that's the part that's going to see. It's going to be the top part of the collar. So you find your notches here, and you match them with your notches on the shirt. And when you do this, try not to stretch the fabric, because the neckline of the shirt has basting, but the collar doesn't. So just be careful not to stretch the collar. And pin it as often or as closely as you need to make sure that it's going to have a nice curve to it, and it's going to be sewn in nicely. Okay, this part needs to have all layers pinned down up to the point where this thing is folded down. Then here you're going to fold it back on this seam where the facing was sewn to the shirt. It's going to fold naturally. So align this top edge. And then on this side, do the same thing. Okay, now that you have that secured, you're going to flip the facing back. Let me clear off some of these threads. And then pull these pins out and then pin through the facing as well. Same thing we did with the other side. Okay, when you sew it, you're going to pull this back. So you're going to sew here all the way down. It's going to come off here. Don't catch this in it. Keep sewing all the way across. Let me pin this again to make sure it's going to stay in place. It's going to come up here, right where that corner is. Finish all the way through. When you're finished, you clip the corners, flip it over, press it out really good, and then you hand sew this closed. So I'm going to press it out and then trim these corners and flip it, and I'll be right back. Okay, I have the collar sewn in, but there is an issue I always have with collars, and I don't know what caused it, but I'm not going to worry about it because it has nothing to do with the function of the collar. You won't even see it. It's just the person that owns it will see it, and that is right here. This has always happened to me, and I'm not quite sure why. Maybe I should have waited until this point before I tuck this under, but then it had to be sewn into the neckline. So it just doesn't meet up here. I'm not going to redo it. Like I said, no one's going to see it. I don't think my son-in-law is going to worry about it. This comes a little bit closer, and everything here matched up with everything here. So I'm not really sure what it is. It's just something that I'm going to have to keep working on the more I do these. So now I'm going to just hand sew this all the way over here, and then I will start on the sleeves after that. Okay, to do the sleeve, we are going to put in 2 rows of basting stitches. You can do 1, but I like to do 2 because that way I'm not trying to sew my seam on a gather stitch or above it or below it. So what I do is I do a basting stitch at a 1/2 inch and then one at 3/4 inches, and I just baste stitch from one pin all the way up and over to the other pin. That way when I pull the threads and ease the sleeve in, then I can just sew between the 2 basting stitches. So that's what I'm going to do right now, and then I'll come back when it's time to pin it to the shirt. I made a mistake and I cut the sleeve too short, so I'm going to add a piece to it, and I'll show you how to do that. So I'm going to do all of that before I sew up the side seams. So let's get started. Now the basting stitch is a straight stitch at the longest length, and mine is a 4. Give yourself a tail here. And now I'm going to do it at the 3/4 inch mark. Okay, before I put this into the shirt, I just want to show you what it looks like when you do the basting stitch. It just kind of naturally creates this light gathering, and I'm not going to take that out. I'm going to match up my marks on my sleeve and my shirt, and then kind of ease it out until it lies flat, and we can get it in that way. Now my sleeve was too short, so what I did, let me see, from the stitching line to the end is 11 and like 1/4 inches, and it needs to be 12 inches long when it's hemmed. So what I did was I did the calculations, made my strip. So this strip ended up being 3 1/8, and then just like I did the collar, I sewed a seam at 5/8 of an inch. First of all, I folded it in half and pressed it, and then I did a seam at 5/8 of an inch, folded it under. So that's what I'm going to either use. I can either use a top stitch to hem the sleeve, or I can hand stitch it. So I just made it extra long. I can just put it anywhere here. Right sides together, and I'm going to pin this together. Okay, now that I've got it pinned on, I'm going to sew at 5/8 of an inch all the way across, and then when I'm finished, I'll trim this off. Okay, and then now I'm going to the ironing board. I'm going to press this out really good. Okay, I went ahead and put the extra piece on. This is what it's going to look like. It won't be gathered, but this is what it looks like. And it was just to make it the length that he wanted it. So, and when I put it on, I just sewed it in, trimmed off this top layer, and then folded it up. But right now, I am going to, after I put the sleeve in, then I'll fold it like this, unfold everything, matching up the creases and the seam where I added the piece on. Make sure those are all lined up. I'll pin each one of those places, and then I'll sew the rest up after it's sewn into the shirt. Okay, everybody, this is what it looks like after I got my second sleeve on. And I wanted to show you what I did up to this point. I didn't show you everything because I'm running out of space on my phone. So after I edit the video, I probably have to delete all my apps just to get get the video to download onto my phone so I can upload it to YouTube. So I couldn't show you everything. So basically what I did was I got the sleeve on, I got the sleeve extension on, and then I went ahead and just serged the sleeve edges and then I serged each side individually. I'm hoping that will make things easier if my daughter needs to take up or let out the shirt. So this is serged both, all the four sides, the front, back, and then the front, back on this side. So, and I'm looking at the shirt and I'm thinking this still looks very, as much as I've pressed it, it still looks kind of that homemade look. So what I'm going to do is, when I'm finished, I'm going to take this top stitching and extend it all the way down. And then for the hem, because it's cut so close to the length that he wants it, I'm just going to serge the edges just to clean everything up, and I'll do a small rolled hem at the bottom. And then I'll move on to the buttons and buttonholes, and then maybe hand sew the sleeve hems, or maybe I will just machine stitch it and kind of give it that top stitching look that will match the collar and the front of the shirt. So that's what I'll be doing next. All right, you guys, it's coming along nicely. I finished the sleeve hems. I had to redo them a couple times because the stitching kind of went off and looked a little weird, so I had to fix that. I top stitched here. I don't know if you can see that very well. And then I'm still going to stitch around here because it had the little vent. I'm going to stitch around here on both sides, serge the hem and roll that up. But I was looking at buttons. They wanted 1/2-inch buttons, and I love buttons. I went to LA a long time ago, and I pick up interesting things. These are really cute. Obviously, I'm not going to use them here. I think I'm going to use these. This is the size we need, and let me see what it looks like. I just kind of want to stick with something natural. These are wooden buttons. I don't have my things marked out yet, but I'm thinking this might be the way I'm going to go. So nothing to really stand out. They're nice looking buttons, but you know, nothing too fancy. So that's the button. Those are the buttons I'm going to use. And now I just need to sew up the side seams, those little vents, serge the bottom, and then hem it. I also need to put a crease in the collar. And the last thing I am thinking about is, after I put the buttonholes and buttons in, should I tack this down? And the only reason that I question whether I should is I don't want to see the pick marks on this side. I like it smooth like this. So I haven't decided if I'm going to do the hand sewing or not. Placing the buttons and buttonholes might be enough to keep that down. You guys, we're almost done. Okay, so I serged the hem, and then I pressed it up just like the width of the serging, and now I'm going to fold it up one more time, and that's a narrow hem, and I'm just going to hem the shirt. This right here might be too thick for my machine, so I might have to hand stitch that, and then I can go ahead and finish sewing with the machine on the rest of it. And then after that, then I have buttonholes and buttons, and I'm done. As you're machine sewing your narrow hem, be careful not to pull the fabric, because it will warp it and it'll look kind of flared at the bottom.